And welcome everyone to the Pulling Each Other Along show, Ability MKE now on River West Radio, 104.1 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm Dave Clark, along with my co-hosts Doug Cornfield and Dave Geis. How you guys doing this week?
Good.
I'm out of Florida with Dave, so I'm doing good because it's much better than New York.
It's not too bad here in Wisconsin.
Dave, before we get started, I really want, I got a package in the mail today. and I really wanted to thank you. Doug doesn't have any clue what this is.
No clue.
But thanks for finally signing me with the Cleveland Indians. Here's a card of me with the Indians, and also me trying to catch the bus.
Yes.
The Indians. And for those of you who missed some of our previous shows, I told a quick funny story about me, my first spring training, being with the Atlanta Braves, and I went to the Cleveland Indian bullpen, and I went on the Cleveland Indian bus, all by mistake. So thanks, Dave, for
no problem. You see, it was meant to be. You were an Indian all along.
I guess so, and you're right. Your little note, you got too much time on your hands, pal.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But let me lead us in tonight. I have a special guest, Dr. Lauren Lieberman from Brockport, State University of New York at Brockport, not too far from my hometown of Corning, New York. And so we'd like to welcome Lauren Lieberman. Thanks for being with us, Lauren.
Here she comes. Hey, Lauren, how you doing today? Dr. Lieberman.
Great. I wanted to thank Dave, and Doug for bringing me on and for putting this amazing book together. I'm just so thrilled at the depth and breadth of people that have written chapters in the book.
It's we've had some amazing stories, and for those that have been kind of coming on for the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've given a little taste of that, from Liv Stone, who is a para surfer and champion surfer, to last week we had Baxter Humby. Baxter Humby is a 4-time, I had it wrong in my notes because I saw 2 times somewhere, but 4-time world champion kickboxer, but is missing his portion of his arm. But he also played things like Spider-Man in the movies as a stunt double, and he's in movies like zombie movies, and he gets his arm chopped off, but it's not really his arm, I guess, it gets chopped off. So, so he's putting his disability or his differences to great use, and he's got a great spirit, and he's part of our book. And we have others. We had Rocky Blyer show up on us with Amanda Clue, who's a part of this book. And, so we really have some. Tim Walsh was on. Tim, of course, a teammate of Dave Clark, and I think you missed him, Dave Geis. But
I did. I missed him by a year, I think.
Yeah, all a part of the famous Indianapolis Clowns that Dave Clark owned. Great story behind the Indianapolis Clowns, Hank Aaron's original professional team. So, but Lauren, we're going to make this show about you as much as possible today. If we want to get started, let me ask you the main question. We like to kind of hone in and find out, what's that one thing that pulled you along in your life?
I love when Doug asked me this. I was actually out in my kayak in Lake Placid, and I was on the phone with him, and he asked me that question. He said, "We're putting together this book, and we want to know who's that person that pulled you along." And I didn't have to think long about it, but I had to think about, which time in my life and in what part of it. And so my chapter starts off with Dr. Monica Lepore, who's on this call now, and she has been there, so supportive and just so encouraging my entire career, from the time I was a freshman in college until now, being on this show, and every step of the way, she's been such a champion. So I talk about when I met her and sitting in on her classes, and how I had all these aha moments that brought me into adapted physical education, that brought me into the world of deafness and sign language and deaf culture, that brought me into the field of visual impairment, and empowered me to feel like I could do anything. And then she helped me get into graduate school and I went to her alma mater, University of Wisconsin La Crosse. And in true Monica fashion, she drove me there and flew back. After I got dropped off at Wisconsin, flew back. I did my master's degree at University of Wisconsin La Crosse. Along the way, I'd share my assignments, my practicums, and she cared about every minute and every part of that process. And then I got a job at the Perkins School for the Blind, where I met Eddie Martinez, who's the second part of my book. And Eddie was one of my students at Perkins who's deafblind. And he was really athletic and really precocious and really persistent. And when I was riding my unicycle around campus for Halloween, he felt my unicycle and he felt me on there. And he said, Lauren, I want to learn how to ride that unicycle. And I was like, you're deaf and blind. How are you going to ride a unicycle? I mean, I'm sighted and hearing, and it took me a whole week to pick it up and even ride down the end of my block. And he would ask me every time he saw me. So finally I said, all right, Eddie, I will teach you how to ride the unicycle. And we practiced every week outside on the track. Then we practiced in the gym along the wall on the ladder. And then he pushed off the wall and he was riding in the gym by himself. And I was in awe. So when it got nicer outside, thank you, Monica. See, Monica's saying, great job, Lauren. She's always with me all the way. And so I got Eddie to go outside back on the track. He can see the lines on the track at Perkins are very thick. So Eddie got up on that unicycle and he rode by himself around that track. And he showed me, yeah, I'm deafblind and I use tactile sign, but I can ride independently on the track. And Eddie is with us in spirit. He's not here because we don't have an interpreter, so he couldn't really access this right now. But hopefully he'll see the tape of this and he'll get the closed caption, because he deserves to know that he is one of those people that pulled me along. And anytime I had a student, whether it was a child with a disability or one of my college students that I had doubts about, I think back on Eddie and I think, everybody doubted Eddie. Everybody thought, oh, you're deafblind and you can't do this. And he showed us that we were wrong. And he showed us the abilities of people who are even deaf and blind. And I don't know how many people listening tonight can ride a unicycle, but it's not that easy.
I tried one.
You did try once?
Yeah.
And you know what? It was that persistence and that belief in himself and that belief that he could do it. Oh, Eddie is here. He's not missing this. Oh, thank you, Yanis Dundas. Okay, she's my new person that I admire is interpreting for Eddie. So he's not missing this. Thank goodness.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
So Eddie is with us, and it's really awesome because I've stayed in touch with Eddie because not only because we're good friends, but also because I always want to know what's he doing next, because he is an inspiration to me. And I know he's an inspiration to a lot of people. And by the way, if you go to YouTube, and if you put in unicycle and deafblind, you will see the story of me teaching Eddie how to ride the unicycle. Because when we were at Perkins, one of the teachers said, I have to get this on tape. And and he's a very funny guy. Eddie wants you to know that he's also a very funny guy. He is, but he's a very funny guy. But like this teacher, okay, this is 1991, and she said, I have to get this on tape. And in those days it was a VHS tape. And I had that tape, and so many professors wanted to borrow it. And so I made copies of the VHS tape. And finally, so many, people that are teaching college students, like, don't underestimate kids who are deafblind or kids with disabilities. So I ended up putting it on YouTube, and now everybody can show their students. But I mean, I think it's a great lesson for anyone that, here's a person that anybody would think that you couldn't do something like riding a unicycle, and he proved us wrong. And Eddie continues to show the world what people who are deafblind can do. And he has a master's degree, and he lives in DC, and obviously he's very resourceful. So I'm really proud of everything he's done. And again, it's not me that was always teaching him. it was he was teaching me and pulling me along. But
Absolutely.
I had an amazing experience at Perkins with, not only Eddie, but all the staff. I mean, there's so much you can learn from the other teachers that are teaching kids who are deafblind. And so then after I finished teaching at Perkins, I went and got my doctorate at Oregon State University. And then I got my first job, and I was teaching, and I got my first job teaching at Brockport. And so at Brockport, my first year at Brockport, I realized that my students are going to get this degree teaching physical education, and they were never going to really see a child with a visual impairment or a child who's deafblind. And I just thought there's something wrong with that, because now they have to go out and teach every child that comes into their class. Well, how are they going to know how to teach the kids who are visually impaired or kids who are deafblind? And so I wrote some grants, and that first year, and it was 1995, 96, I started Camp Abilities, which is a sports camp for children who are visually impaired and blind and deafblind. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I started the camp that, by the way, the website's right here. Thank you so much. These guys are so organized. I'm really impressed with them. And so I started that camp, and I had the camp for a few years and realized there's so many kids coming to this camp. So these are just some pictures from Camp Abilities from other states, the kids from Connecticut and kids from Maryland and Alaska and Texas were coming to our camp. But then the kids from New York couldn't come to camp because it was full. And I said, there's something wrong with this picture. So I started actually saying no. The kids from Connecticut, I said, you guys are going to have to start your own camp in Connecticut. I had kids flying into our camp from Alaska. So then Alaska people said, we want to start a camp. You have to come up and help us start a camp there. And by the way, when I started the camp at Brockport, I called Monica and I said, Monica, please, I want to start this camp and I need help. And so she flew up and she helped me start that camp, the first year of camp. And she was there every single year for the first 17 years. And then she started, actually, Monica and her daughter Maria started so many other camps that they couldn't always come to our camp because they were starting other camps in literally in Canada, in Arizona, in Delaware, in Pennsylvania. And there were just so many other camps they were working on, they couldn't always come to our camp. But when we went to the Alaska camp, we had a whole group of us went up there and started. That was our first expansion camp. And since then, we've all been teaching people how to start Camp Abilities. And now we have Camp Abilities in other countries. And in fall of 2019, I got a global Fulbright scholarship. And I had the opportunity to go to Ghana and Ireland and Brazil and start new Camp Abilities in those countries. And they still, I mean, Ireland just had their camp 2 weeks ago. They had a virtual camp, unfortunately, but this is like their 12th year of their camps as well. So of course Monica's by my side, and we had an athlete come to camp and she was a swimmer. And Monica had her in the pool, and she was on her high school swim team, and she did okay on our high school swim team, but she was really fast. And her name's Martha Ruther. And we said, Martha, you're really fast. Let's look up your times and we'll compare them to the junior Paralympians with your level of vision. She's a B2 level of visual impairment and female and your age. And she never even heard of the Paralympics. She didn't even know that she could compete against people who are visually impaired. And so when we looked up her time, she would have come in 8th in the world.
Wow.
And we had no idea. She had no idea. So when her parents came to pick her up, we told them about the Paralympics and that she really should go on sign up for the juniors competitions. And so the next summer, she didn't come to Camp Abilities because she was traveling around the country competing against other kids with visual impairments like herself. And she was doing really well. And so she got a scholarship to go to college for swimming, but quickly got invited to train for the Paralympics in Rio. And so our first ever Hall of Fame award was given to Martha Ruther. She zoomed in from Colorado Springs to, actually at that time it was Skype, right? She Skyped in to Camp Abilities, and her parents came and we gave her the award with her parents there. And so Martha was our first Hall of Fame winner, and she competed in Rio. And interestingly enough, that first competition, she came in 8th in the world.
Wow.
Just like we had predicted. I mean, it was just amazing. So fast forward to last year, Martha made the Tokyo Paralympic team. They were ready to go, and then COVID hit.
Right.
And so I'm really proud of Martha, because I'm not proud because she's not here. I'm proud that she's not here because right this minute, she is in a competition competing to keep her first place on the U.S. Paralympic team.
Wow.
And her mother texted me and said, we're going to watch her meet, and then we're going to come as soon as we can. So as soon as they come, I'll just give them a shout out, because Martha taught me the power of knowledge and the power of encouragement. I mean, taking a child from their freshman swim team, giving them the knowledge and the power and the tools to get to the Paralympics and beyond is just awesome. So the other cool thing was when she came back from Rio, she really wanted to finish her degree that she left when she was training for the Paralympics. And she thought, I really know the Brockport campus. So she came to Brockport and she swam on our swim team. She literally flew back from Rio. She was in my disability sport class because I didn't know any other professors who would let someone come 3 weeks late to class and still let them in. And I knew I would. So she was in my disability sport class, which was perfect. I mean, she slides in from the airport and then she can do a nice presentation in the class. So that's Martha Ruther. So she was the third person in my story. And so my story consists of Monica, and then Eddie, and then Martha. And those are just some of the people who have pulled me along. And I can just name some other people. I know that Judy Bird and June Converse are on this. And there are also 2 people who have been very near and dear to me and that have helped me along the way. And if you go to campabilitiesworld.com, we just started a Camp Abilities World website and Facebook page so that people that are in the Camp Abilities all over the world have a place for their camp websites and to advertise their camps and to post their videos. We have amazing videos on both of our websites if you want to learn more about the camp.
Yeah, that's great. And, and it's amazing to me, and, because we're really close to each other. I live in Corning, you're in Brockport. It's not very far away. And, it's funny, I met or found out about you through an intern of yours. And I don't even remember her name, actually. You might remember her name better than I do. When we were just doing fundraising for our own sports camps for kids with disabilities. And as far as I know, I had a question for you. As I was wondering, because Dave Clark's story is so close to you in Brockport, were you even aware of Dave Clark's story of playing professional baseball on crutches before we got introduced to each other?
Oh, yeah, of course. My students have to do role models, and I've had several students that have done the Dave Clark story as Dave Clark was their role model. So I knew about the Dave Clark story, but I didn't realize that Dave was that close to us, or else I would have asked you to come and speak to our class yourself.
Well, he's in Florida now, but we can still do that. Pre-COVID, he was in Corning, and I'd have him up because we do a lot of our disability baseball camps in Hudson Valley and Rochester and in Corning and Binghamton, et cetera. So, I don't know how much we'll be able to do that this year. We're doing a few camps. We've got one actually coming up in Fort Myers, so down here in Florida.
Wonderful.
But, so we'll see. Obviously it's a little different niche than what you have, but still in a very similar vein.
If we can add beep baseball, we could collaborate and our kids could come to your camp as well. I mean, we have all the bases and the beeping balls. So, it's not that far off that we could collaborate together, which would be wonderful.
For the person that's out there, explain what beep ball is, because a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with that.
Sure. Actually, so beep baseball is actually, this is batting off a tee, but in beep baseball, the players bat from a pitch. And so everybody's blindfolded the ball's beeping, and they hit a pitched ball that's beeping, and they run to either a first base or a third base, whichever one's beeping. And then the outfield has to pick the ball up. If they pick the ball up before the runner gets to the base, then they're out. If the runner gets to the base first, then they're safe and it's a point. So it's not one of those continuous games where you go to first, second, third. It's a discrete, you bat it and you run to the base. And it is you're on the edge of your seat. It is so competitive. And in 2017, we hosted the World Series of Beep Baseball here in Brockport. And I was the tournament director. So there were 24 teams from all over the US and Taiwan and Canada.
Wow.
It was amazing. These people, I thought that some of them were cheating. I thought they weren't wearing blindfolds, but they were all wearing blindfolds. It's just an amazing sport.
Sounds like Dave Clark. He would try to sneak a load.
Never do that.
Whatever advantage he could get.
Never do that.
Right, Dave, guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What questions do you have,
I'm just
Dave
so
Clark?
floored that people look at him as a role model. I just don't get that.
It's because of the Colgate smile.
I can see why, definitely.
Yes. Dave Clark, who is to my right here, although it's different on my screen. What kind of questions do you have for Dr. Lieberman?
Well, Lauren covered a lot of my questions. She really did, because I had all of that down to ask. But go back to Eddie for a minute. How old would Eddie be right now? Just curious.
Let me see. That is 91 if Eddie was 40.
He was 13, I think it said in your.
So if whatever 91,
45, 44, 45.
He'd be about 91. He'd be like 40, 43, 44.
around there. He can jump in right now if
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
Let's see if he puts up
it-
a chat here for us. Eddie, how old are you? Well, we may find out.
I'm just curious because time has a way.
45.
You're
There
good,
we
Dave.
go.
He's 45 exactly.
Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
That's amazing. Because you think back and you probably don't see him as 45. You see him as that 13-year-old that was.
Yeah, and he still sees me as that 23-year-old too.
Now, Lauren, a question I had. I mean, obviously, you've kind of like me. You didn't probably set out to do disability sports events and all these unique things and the abilities and extra ability world. But it sounds like you were an athlete as well, though.
And I have to give a shout out to my father who's on this call. Thanks, Pop. My father, Stanley Lieberman, who is a lawyer, and he's been with me. Obviously, he's here as well. When I was younger, like we had every piece of sports equipment. I had a basketball hoop, tennis rackets. I had tetherball in the backyard, archery. We had fishing rods, bikes. We had big wheels, everything. And so I just thought that's how everybody lived. Like all day, all we would do is play sports.
Right.
And any sport I wanted to be in after school. I mean, I didn't always get a ride home, but I was allowed to join every sport I wanted to join. And just really encouraging. I mean, my parents came to my tennis matches and my lacrosse games and my gymnastics meets. I mean, my father used to tell everybody I was going to be in the Olympics for gymnastics. And I was pretty good at gymnastics, but I wasn't Olympic material. But, he made me feel like I was an Olympian, And so that was just something that was like a natural thing. And I couldn't imagine my life without it. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I knew that I wanted to teach kids and I knew I wanted to be involved in sports. At the time, and I think it's still this way, unfortunately, physical education isn't always seen as the most proud profession. And sometimes people look down on physical education.
Mm-hmm.
But I really knew that I could make a difference. And those physical education teachers that weren't very good or that gave us a bad name, I could change that. And when I found adapted physical education with Monica, I realized that if you can teach kids with disabilities how to do typical things and get them out into the community where people can see kids with disabilities doing everyday sports, just like their peers, maybe they will see them just like their peers and change perceptions and not have people look down on them or pity them or give them a medal for just showing up.
Mhm.
And so that's something that I have strived to do still to this day. And I actually have a presentation tomorrow about this very thing at our national conference, because I think we're still perpetuating that pity charity model that if you can make a basket, we're all going to clap for you and you're going to get a medal. And I don't think that that's the way it should be. I think that we should have people like I have a lot of my athletes are in mainstream 5Ks and mainstream 10Ks. And I actually have my graduate student, Lindsay, who's blind. She just signed up for the California Marathon. You know,
Right.
that's normal. And that's what we want. We want to push our athletes to go out into the community and to strive to reach their potential so that when they get out there and people see them, they see them more like them than not like them.
Right.
And to me, that's been my goal with Camp Abilities. Everything we do at Camp Abilities is either an after school sport or Paralympic sport or recreation. It's so funny. Our athletes are out on the canal kayaking. We live on the Erie Canal. Our university is on the Erie Canal. And the kids will be stand-up paddleboarding. And someone will go by and say, "Oh man, you guys are so lucky you get to stand up paddleboard." They have no idea that they're blind. And so you can't tell. They don't have a cane when they're out there. They just like listen. We have buoys that make sound and they go back and forth to each buoy, and they're independent and they're out there and people see them. When they learn that they're blind, they have that change in their mindset. That social constructivism improves in their mind. Instead of that person they might have met that might have maybe been dependent or maybe been asking for money on the street, that's wiped away when you see someone running in a marathon or stand-up paddleboarding by themselves or riding a tandem bike 30 miles out on the canal, realizing that they rode here with their partner. That's life changing for people. So in Section 5, where we are in
Mhm.
our Section 5 in New York State, you guys know about Section 5, right?
Yeah, we're in section 4.
On our cross country meets,
Yeah.
it's normal now. It's normal to have kids who are blind and visually impaired running in cross country. So maybe like 12 or 14 years ago, we would be on the news. The kids would be on the news. And I would get so mad because I'm like, this is not newsworthy. It should be something that happens every day and nobody thinks it's weird or strange or newsworthy. And you know what? I haven't seen any of my kids on the news for that lately. And to me, that is a win because I want them to be on the news because they placed in their meet. I had one of my former campers went to community college for his first 2 years. He ran on the cross country team. They did a story about him as one of the athletes of the week. And his high school vision teacher sent me the story. They didn't mention that he had a visual impairment at all. That's a win. And that's what we're striving for. We want our kids to be out there in the mainstream. We want them to be with everybody else. And we want it to be normal. And that's what Camp Abilities is all about. And that's what I've learned it from Monica, I've learned it from Eddie, and I've learned it from Martha. And you see Martha now, she's breaking records and she's really in the forefront of swimming. And I wouldn't be surprised if she's swimming fast enough to compete against her sighted peers as well.
Well, we got about 20 seconds. Let me wrap up the first very, very quick session. This has been the 104.1 River West Radio with Dave Clark, Dave Geist, and Doug Cornfield on the Pulling Each Other Along show. Goodbye, Milwaukee, but we're going to have a little after show and Facebook if you want to join us there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doug, Dave, and Dave.
There we go. All right. So again, we've got with us Dr. Lauren Lieberman, and I'm here with Dave Clark in the very, very sunny and nicely warmed Florida, Southwest Florida. We actually just scheduled a Disability Dream and Do baseball camp down here. Little different this year because of the COVID restrictions. We're not able to use the professional stadiums yet. So we had to do it differently. So that's what we do anyway. And we figure things out. And, there's a couple of things that you said that reminded me of a story of Dave Clark that when he was in the newspaper, and I'm going to have you tell the story, but it was when they spelled your name wrong.
How could they spell that?
They called
I'm not aware.
Don,
of
they
what-
called you Don Clark instead
Oh yeah,
of Dave
yeah,
Clark.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, but there was also an after description, Don Clark, and it occurred, I don't know, very early in the '70s when I was pitching. I can't remember where it was at, but I'd come in relief and put the fire out, so to speak, and we had won the game. And newspaper reporter, it was Kearney, Nebraska. It was in Kearney, Nebraska, and the next day in the newspaper, he said, Don Clark, comma, a pint-sized cripple.
Oh,
In
no.
the newspaper, retired the side in the ninth, picked up the save. I kind of laughed. Of course, the rest of the rest of the season, I was pint-sized to my teammates. Hey, pint-sized, and I sent that home to my mother because I was laughing. I thought it was funny. Oh, she was livid. I sent it home to her. She was livid. She was going to sue the Kearney, whatever the Kearney newspaper was. I said, Mom, the pen is mightier than the sword. Lay off. The guy will crucify me if you start. This is the pros, Mom. Don't do that again. Next time I'll have Dave's mom is writing me and telling me this. Yeah, I mean, you. It's funny. It's funny how society changes because I've told the story before about being called some other types of names, and that wouldn't be put up with today. That would, I doubt very seriously.
But there's one thing about that article. He commented on your play. Do you remember what he said?
No.
He actually said, even though he was a pint-sized cripple, in the article, he basically commented on how well he played. And so to your point of Dave's whole fight was just to be able to be out on the field and to be considered a competitor, and and I think that's really what you were striving for. Of course, you wanted to win; you hated to lose.
Oh, I wanted to win. I just wanted to be an athlete that helped whatever team I was on to win, and I to be frank, I never even saw my own limitations. And that's what that goes back to my parents, and I think it goes back to the parents of the people that you're talking about, Lauren. You have to have special parents to, because one of the stories I try to get across to the parents and caregivers of the kids that attend our camps is let them skin their knees, let them skin their elbows. We have a tendency to reel the leash really tight when there's some limitations involved, and we never know what the potential is if we do that. So you have to you got to let up on that. My parents did that, just like your parents never told you you couldn't play a sport. Mine did the same. Only it wasn't the thing to do back when my parents brought me up, because I was brought up. I had some severe limitations, and most of the time parents would not allow their kids to do what mine did. And so it's okay to get some bumps and bruises along the way. Just make sure you're doing. I've always said failure is not trying something and not being able to do it. Failure is not trying to do it in the first place. And so I think all the people you're alluding to, have taken up that mantra and carried it to the extreme. So just wanted to ask you a quick question, Lauren. You have anything to do with Ohio State University? Have you ever do you know anyone at Ohio State?
Yes, I just read a book with Sam Hodge from Ohio State.
Okay, I was wondering if you knew the name Bill Heward.
No.
Bill was an adaptive PE, a professor. He was actually one of my managers in the 1970s with the Indianapolis Clowns, went on to teach at Ohio State. I actually joined him there for a semester and was a teaching assistant to Bill for the adaptive PE back in I think I was in 1980. I was just wondering if you knew, because Bill and I still keep in touch, and he's semi-retired. He's still doing some conferences and some traveling for Ohio State.
You were in a book of his years ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What's the name of that book?
I have it somewhere.
I don't know.
I read your chapter.
Okay. Yeah, I'll bet you did.
I did.
So anyway,
I learned some new things.
but
So-
let me ask you, how Capabilities is now, by your, in the chapter I read, it's in 20 states and 11 different countries. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And go back in time. I know Monica Lepore helped you get started, but really, where was the first seed planted for that, for the Capabilities?
That's a great question. I'm hearing a little echo here. But when I was in college, I volunteered to do Ski for Light. I don't know if you've heard of Ski for Light. It's a cross country ski program for adults with visual impairments. And so I'm, 22 years old, 21, 22 years old, and I volunteered at this week-long program teaching cross country skiing to adults. I had never cross country skied. I had taught some adults with visual impairments because my university had what's called a VIP program, visually impaired person program, where we would have adults with visual impairments come in every semester, and we would do like a tandem bike weekend or a canoeing weekend. And I volunteered for that. So they invited me to do this Ski for Light program. And Dave, that's a good question because, it's funny because Doug was talking about like, how did you know what you wanted to do? This was an aha moment. I'm in a adapted physical education program, and I teach a woman how to cross country ski. It's her first time. And she says to me, I never could have done that without you. Imagine, I never knew I made an impact on anyone like that. And this adult tells me she never could have done it without me. It was like a drug. All I could do, I wanted to have that feeling all the time. And I get that feeling all the time now. And so that's what happened. That was the aha moment that pushed me in this direction.
No, I think Dave and I certainly relate to that, as far as one of the things that I often say when we get a chance to speak about Disability Dream and Do is Dave and I will be sitting at a stadium getting ready to watch a minor league baseball game, and it's we invite all the families to come to a game so they get to watch the players that they just did this camp with. And a mother, and I have stories of a father as well, but it's usually a mother, will walk up to us to say thank you. And she gets about 3 or 4 feet from us, and she can't get the words out because of what the camp meant to her. And so that's a drug. We don't need the thank yous. Dave and I don't do it for the thank yous. We do it when we hear a parent on the field, and we've heard this several times. We do it when a parent says, I didn't know my child could hit a ball like that. I didn't know they could run the bases.
Mm-hmm.
And they're 13, 14, and 15 years old in some cases. And it's because they were never given the opportunity. They were never shown an example like Dave Clark and Dave Stevens and even my son Gideon that are out there doing things in spite of their limitations. And oftentimes are doing things better.
Mm-hmm.
In Dave Clark's situation, he wasn't on the field at the level that he played because he wasn't any good and they just wanted to give him a chance. He was on the field because he got people out.
There were many nights I did.
Well, yeah, sometimes you did it, I'm sure. But if there had been a lot of those nights, your career wouldn't have been 10 years of pitching. It would have been a half a year and you would have been done.
We're playing first base a lot more.
Right.
a couple other things. I just want to share that Eddie just put in the chat our link to our video of him riding the unicycle. If anybody wants to copy that and paste it,
nice.
and post it. I'm telling you, most people wouldn't believe it if you told them that, they wouldn't believe it. You have to see it to believe it. And that's Eddie, and he's just such a born athlete. And Eddie, thank you for finding that and sharing that, because I'm really proud of that. And when a lot of our freshmen at Brockport, they have to interview a professor, and they asked me what was my proudest moment, and that's the moment I always say when I taught Eddie how to ride a unicycle. I mean, I think that because that changed my life as well. You know, that sets you in that direction of really having higher standards for everyone that you teach. And so I also want to share another story. We
Right.
have an athlete, Andrew Mead Colgrove, who's from Buffalo, and he came to camp when he was 9, not having a lot of experience or opportunities. He lives in a very small town. The PE teachers really didn't know how to include him. Came to Camp Abilities and just found his groove. He's an athlete through and through. And so he started a goalball team at his school. We teach a lot of self-advocacy. We're actually writing a book on self-advocacy right now. He went to his principal. So when he got into 9th grade, he went to the principal and athletic director, sat them down and said, I want to start a goalball team. They gave him money for uniforms, a coach, and he started a goalball team. And he realized pretty quickly that he loved that idea of, because goalball is a Paralympic sport, but it's all blocking the goal. And when blind ice hockey blew up, started in Canada and came down, he loved ice hockey, and he just tried out for the U.S. team. And Andrew is now on the U.S. blind ice hockey team. And I'm proud to say he's graduating from high school in May, and he just decided he's going to come to Brockport.
Nice.
So, we'll have so blind ice hockey is not a Paralympic sport yet, but he's young. He's only 18. So by the time it becomes a Paralympic sport, we'll have another Paralympian coming out of Camp Abilities.
Sure.
And also another cool thing that stemmed from camp is that a lot of colleges now are starting goalball teams, which is a Paralympic sport. But if you're at a school for the blind or you're on a junior team, typically there's no other teams until you get like to the more elite athletes. There's like this disconnect when students are college age. And now colleges are starting goalball teams all over. And we had our first tournament. Well, it was right before COVID, and we had 5 colleges come to Brockport and compete a regional tournament. But now a lot of colleges are having goalball teams, and because Andrew's coming and we have other athletes who are coming to Brockport, we are going to be having a really strong goalball team. I also want to give a shout out. I have another student who's coming to Brockport who's blind, and her name is Megan Hale, and she has a running guide dog, which is a guide dog that's trained to be a running guide dog. So when she wants to go for a run, she runs with her dog. And so she just finished up 2 years at Hudson Valley Community College, and she's coming to Brockport, and she's going to be majoring in adapted physical education as well. So I also want to give out a shout out to another one of our athletes, Peter Reifenberg, who is visually impaired, and he's a triathlete. He competes in triathlons, Ironman triathlons, against sighted people and places. And he is just an incredible athlete. He was one of our campers, and then he was one of our coaches, and now he's one of my students, and he's also on one of my grants. He's our Lavelle Scholar. And so we've got just these amazing young people that are coming up, and they are going to continue to change the perceptions of people about visual impairment. And to me, it's like this next generation of people with visual impairments aren't going to have to worry about as much discrimination, I hope, because there's so many people that are setting the society straight of what people with visual impairments can do.
Right. Yeah, and obviously this man beside me here, it would probably make you cringe to understand and know the discrimination that he experienced, from crowds throwing food out on the stadium grounds, to coaches that wouldn't coach him even though he was being basically promoted to the next level. Did you feel like you got discriminated as a coach much?
No.
Interesting.
And I think by that time, things had changed in society, and I think I had more or less paid my dues, so they kind of knew. Um, I don't. There's plenty of them to tell me. Dave Geis was one of them. Told me I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. There's, you know,
But back here,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, that's what he's telling me right now.
okay,
So yeah.
That's why he's smiling so much.
he froze up. He
But-
froze up, so you did it.
But no, I think as a coach, I didn't. I know as a player, you're right. There was quite a bit of not being accepted. Let's put it that way. So I can see what Dr. Lieberman is talking about. Can understand it, and you know, I want to just throw this in. There's a little off the course of what we're talking
No, we never do that.
about tonight, but I ran into a gentleman this week that knew nothing about me, and we got talking, and I was telling him about the camp we were doing, and eventually the talk got around to baseball, and you know, he asked me my experience in baseball, so he kind of backed me into a corner because you know, Doug, I don't like to talk about it really unless I'm prodded. And so I told him, and he said his name was Jesse, and I won't use his last name, but his name was Jesse, and he said his base. I thought it was funny. He said his baseball career ended and peaked at the same time, and I thought a lot about you, Dave, at that time, because it peaked when he struck out 3 consecutive times in T-ball.
Oh no.
I'm just kidding, Dave. I'm just kidding, Dave. So, but
That's why you were a catcher.
That's right. That's right.
but I thought that was a funny little tidbit to throw
You
in there.
think
But
about, Dave, you think about it though, you've paved the way for the youth of today to have an easier experience because now people have seen you be successful and you competing. And so to me that, you know, all your suffering and discrimination has actually opened doors for other people. And that's what I think a lot of the older adults that with visual impairment today are doing for the next generation.
well, I think too that when you were talking a little bit earlier, um, that you know, you want acceptance, and you don't. I never did anything for the headlines to get the headlines.
That's true.
The problem is that when you're a person like me with limitations, or you have visual impairments, and you do something out of the ordinary, it does catch people off guard, and so it's a natural thing for somebody to want to cover that. I still today, I shun the media. I can't stand
No, you love the media.
this guy. He'll you know, he'll be telling me to do this interview, do that interview, and I, you know,
No, you love it.
I don't love it.
Yeah.
And
I remember you doing interviews with the clowns, and you hated it. You really hated it. He was looking for anybody to do it for him.
well, and it's just, but you have to accept the fact that, like you said, you don't want it to be newsworthy because you just want them to fit in. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because the good thing of it becoming newsworthy is that maybe the next person with the same limitations sees this,
Mhm.
and now they're thinking, I can do that too. So there's a good and a bad side to it. I get it both sides.
I've had to keep telling him when we do, you know, when we if we get this movie done that is in the works for Dave's story, that of course they're not going to recognize him when he goes to a restaurant.
Man.
They're only going to recognize the actor that plays him, and so because he wants to make sure he stays under the radar. So that's my promise to him.
I think he should play himself.
Well, and an opening scene or something, that's a possibility.
Well, actually, you got to make sure that the person that plays you has a disability, because I can't stand when people play someone with a disability that doesn't have a disability. But I want to go back to something that Dave was saying, that today, it's still happening today, that a lot of our kids are told, we don't want you to play this sport or be in this activity or be on this sports team because you might get hurt. And that is taking away their dignity of risk. And the dignity of risk is a concept that's only been applied to right now it's only been applied to older adults. So if you look up any of the dignity of risk literature, it hasn't been applied to people with disabilities. But my graduate student, Lindsay, just did a big paper on applying the dignity of risk to youth with visual impairments and youth with disabilities in physical education, because too many times it's the physical education teacher deciding, I'm not going to let you have the same opportunity your peers have to get hurt, to bruise your knees, maybe to get to lose. I'm going to take you out of that equation and not even give you that opportunity. That's not right, because they don't have the self-determination that their peers have. And so we have to provide that dignity of risk to all kids. I mean, within reason. I mean, of course, if it's contraindicated or it's going to be something that's detrimental to their health, of course you're going to say no. But I'm not going to remove a child just because they're visually impaired. Like, I had a kid, he was telling me that they weren't going to let him wrestle because he's blind. And I'm like, why wouldn't they let you wrestle? Because they're worried about his vision. He's blind. He's not going to get more blind. Why can't he wrestle? Like, there's just, I had a student who they told him he couldn't swim in the deep end. He just had to stay in the shallow end. Why? Because you're blind. Blindness doesn't affect your body or your function or your physiology, your biomechanics. And there are people who are visually impaired who do distance swims and who swim underwater and who swim competitively at a high level. And they wouldn't let him swim in the deep end because he was blind. So these are the kind of things that we're battling, and the dignity of risk is something that we're really pushing right now. And I hope that everybody else will push for kids with disabilities to have equal opportunities as their peers.
Yeah, I think it's really, really imperative, because you said something that they're too afraid to lose. Well, if you never get a chance to lose,
Right.
you also never get a chance to win.
Right.
Right.
And winning is inspiring. And I think at least we see this in our camp. Winning is different for people. Winning might be hitting a baseball for the first time. I have on video. Actually, it's a young lady. I think she was closer to 30, because on our camps we don't put an age limit on what we do, and so we get kind of all ages. And this happened to be a lady that was blind, and we don't have the beat ball. We don't have that, but we should get up to speed with that someday. But we'll tell them when to swing and the ball's coming. And she hit a ball, and I have it on video. And she did the biggest fist pump with the biggest smile when she felt that ball hit the bat, because of that sense of accomplishment. Yeah. And she was psyched, and she did the whole camp, all the drills, that we do. And when you see that kind of response, that kind of victory, and then we'll have other kids, and we'll go, kids and young adults. It's all different situations, but we'll go around and say, and they'll go, "Oh, I was hitting home runs. I was hitting home runs." They might have not. That ball might not have gone 3 inches, but in their mind, they were hitting home runs, and we were okay with that, because it was a home run to them. And
that's the way I hit.
That's the way you hit home runs.
Yeah, 3 inches.
So 3-inch home runs. Yeah. Kurt, we haven't been talking to you. I pulled you up on the screen, and you're just looking pretty today with that green screen in the background.
Don't get carried away.
Now, Kurt, you're also in the adaptive world. Do you have any questions for Dr. Lieberman?
Yeah, Dr. Lieberman, first of all, thank you for everything that you do. I think it's wonderful that the world has folks like yourself and the camp abilities and everything. And, in the last decade, I've been trying to sort out, a lot of the things like you've been describing. And what I've come up with is the disability community taught me that 1 out of 4 people identify with a disability, which means that I come from a community where 3 out of 4 of us would not as much identify in that disability community. So I kind of look at there's 3 out of 4 of us out there that really could use constant insight within the disability community. Are these things that you think about? Like, how are we going to transfer this knowledge from the disability community to the rest of us?
That is a great question. Because, well, one of our sayings is nothing about us without us. And so particularly for our research, for our classes, for anything I write, like I just finished a chapter in a book about teaching children with visual impairments. And I wrote it with my master's student. Lindsay, who's blind, because I can't speak for them. And I have written that chapter before by myself, and I shouldn't have. And I wrote the deaf chapter, and I wrote it with my friend Jessica, and she's deaf. And she added a lot of insight that I never would have thought of. And so to me, it's nothing about us without us. And I think that's really important. And I just had a colleague, and she's doing this research, and she's analyzing like yoga and exercise videos. So this is the coolest research, looking to see how accessible it is to someone who's blind. I said, well, do you have anybody who's blind on your panel who's deciding this? And she said, I shouldn't I? I said, yeah, you should. You have to. If I were reviewing that paper, I would reject it. Because, yeah, I mean, you might be right about your analysis and the verbiage that's used and how correct their directions are. But you're never going to know if you don't ask someone who's blind. Is this accurate enough? Can you follow this? And so those are the kind of things that I've learned along the way. And I've learned a lot. I mean, you learn so much from people who are deaf. I've been consulting with the St. Francis School for the Deaf for the past 7 months. I've been working with their staff, and even on Zoom, like they won't even start a workshop unless the interpreter's there, because deaf people have to have equal access as the hearing people. And I was like, well, all the staff's here, it's already 2:00, we should start. And they said, no, we can be late. We can't start until the interpreter gets here. I mean, she wasn't that much later, but that point, that ethic, that equality is so important. It's so strict that people who are deaf know they're not going to miss anything because that's what they believe.
Yeah.
That's good point.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thanks for the insight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave, do you have any questions
Yeah.
for Dr. Lieberman?
I do have one. In a couple of days, I'll be leaving for a camp that I work with as an athletic director. And I know the staff that we hire, and this is for able-bodied kids, but all the staff that we hire, they go through a pretty intense orientation. I'm wondering I'm assuming your staff that you have to hire for your camps. Mm-hmm. First of all, where do you get your staff from? Or are they just know about your camp and they volunteer?
Oh, this is a great question.
And what type of training do you give them?
That's an awesome question. So we hire mostly college students, physical education, adapted physical education, vision specialist, orientation mobility specialist, special education, sometimes occupational therapy, PT students, and sometimes high school students. Some of the high school students are even some of the best coaches. Nice. But because we're all from different backgrounds, we all come together for a day and a half, full day and a half, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 9 to 1 the next day. And we talk about everything from the types of visual impairments. We talk about the guiding techniques, running techniques. We talk about emotional safety, physical safety. And the whole afternoon, that first day, every single person puts on a blindfold and plays every sport.
Nice.
So they learn not only how to teach the sport, but they experience it like their camper is going to experience it. And so once they go through all that, then we have the campus police come in, the nurse comes in. We put independence so much. They actually have to go through like the line and get their food with the blindfold on so that they learn how to promote independence with the kids.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have a very in-depth orientation, but what we also do is every other night, we meet with them and we give them the feedback, and we tell them, okay, you're doing a little too much for them. You got to take hands off, give them a little more independence. Maybe give them a lot of kudos because it's a long, hot days. I mean,
Sure.
we go from 7 in the morning till about 10:30 at night every single day.
Yep.
It's hot. We do 4 sports during the day, and then they do recreation activities all night. We have socials. We have dance parties. You know, it's
Nice. Very nice. How many kids do you have at your camps?
Oh, she might have froze up.
Yep.
the group. So we also have returning coaches, returning group leaders,
Yeah.
returning specialists
Sure.
that actually give a lot of feedback along the way as well.
Right. Very nice.
Is
How many kids do you
your
have?
camp, Dr. Lieberman, is your camp mostly able-bodied, or not able-bodied, but intellectually sound or not as challenged, or intellectually challenged as well? Is it inclusive there, or is it mostly physical
That's a
limitations?
great question. They have to have a visual impairment.
Okay.
And if they happen to have an intellectual disability or some autism or deafblind, they just have to have communication and be independent and not have behavior issues that would impede them.
Okay.
Sure.
So there's some not restrictions, but some guidelines. You know,
Right, some guidelines. And so, because most kids aren't just plain blind. There are a lot of kids, they have a visual impairment and
Somehow.
right.
ability to be part of the camp.
Right. You're freezing up on us a little bit, but we're catching most of that. But it is probably time to wrap up the show. It's been, real pleasure to have you on. We've been on the Pulling Each Other Along show. Thank you, Kurt, for continuing to be our host with Ability MKE now. Dave Geis, one of the Colgate men from long ago. The bullpen catcher, Lauren, Dr. Lieberman, thank you for what you do. Dave and I get it, because we've been doing these things and we appreciate it. We need more of these kind of things, in our opinion, and not less. And so we're just glad you're a part of that team. So let me wrap up this portion of the show. And Dave, anything you want to say as we say goodbye here?
Just thanks to all of you for partaking tonight and making the show is what it is.
All right. So again, this has been the Pulling Each Other Along show. Goodbye,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Let
for
me,
my
let me end with
Take
this
care.
nice graphic with Dr. Lieberman. Thank you, guys.